Hello, welcome back to Chezzetcook. I'm Oscar Holland. Today we're going to be doing two things. As promised in the previous video, and as you may have seen in the opening cinematics, we're building Petpeswick Landing. We're also going to be expanding the downtown area a bit in the immediate vicinity of the landing. This area of downtown is older than the central business district next to it. Petpeswick Landing is the landing site of the first British frigate to land and ultimately found the city of Chezzetcook. I had a lot of footage to put into this one episode, so I have to warn you, it might seem a bit chaotic at times. This is because I'd be working on an area and I'd find a building in the menu that I wanted to place somewhere else. Then I'd be working over there and then I'd just be moving back and forth a lot. If you pay close enough attention, you may see a building in one part of the video and it's gone in another, without seeing it really change on screen. I already have the footage going at 4 times speed just to get through it all in a reasonable time. So some stuff just had to get cut out, but generally you get the idea of how I built these areas. I've been playing the game since it was released, so if you have any questions about how I built something or what mod it is I'm using, ask me in the comment section. And of course, if you enjoy the video, click the like button and subscribe for more episodes. Today's episode is slightly longer than the last two, so if you're more interested in the finished product than watching the build, click the button in the video now to skip ahead to the closing cinematics. I also post a lot of short videos and pictures on Instagram, so feel free to follow me there as well. So let's talk about what's happening on screen. I started off by doing a little terraforming to mark where the landing is going to be. And don't worry, if you see it called Chezzetcook Landing on screen, that was just a placeholder name until I could come up with Petpeswick Landing, which is named after the Petpeswick Ocean Inlet. Then I went through and deleted some of the buildings I had already placed down that I don't believe fit what I want the area to be. The aim of the area is to be a bit older, so more brick and wood, less steel and glass. It'll be a bit higher density as well compared to the taller buildings in the CBD that often have large parking lots at their base. I use a mix of downloaded assets and some select vanilla ones. There's actually quite a lot of fantastic vanilla buildings, however I often find I have to convert them to procedural objects to get rid of some of the annoying decorations that have like signs and hedges. They also often have parking spaces that I don't want. I'd rather place my own parking lots. This area took me a while to get the feel I was going for. You'll see a bit of old and new mixed together. Like in real life Halifax, there's a constant battle between those who wish to preserve historic properties and developers who want to build something more modern. One thing I learned while making this episode that I wanted to share with others is that the PO mod has an awesome option to flip an object along its axis, which is what I did with the RBC data center down by the landing. But what I didn't realize that you can see here is that the shadows also flip along that axis. So when the sun is shining on everything else, this building was in shadow and vice versa. So I had flipped the building back to its original orientation, but then I thought I may as well just use the actual building rather than the procedural object now. So a lesson learned for me. So here we are at the Petpeswick Landing. As you can see, I've placed the British frigate asset. The one here in Chezzetcook is not the original frigate that landed here in the 19th century, but a replica built by the Maritime Museum Foundation. Forgive me if I talk too much about the lore of the city rather than what I'm actually building, but I find the best way to build cities and city skylines is to have a story. A past, a present, a future. Why are things where they are? I love these dock assets, which I think are by Ronix, who deserves their own personal thank you for their contribution to the game. Our cities all look so much better because of your contribution. Now I'm probably not using them the way that Ronix intended, but I think I make it work. Once you've made one part, it's pretty easy to copy and paste with the Move It mod to cover more area quicker. The time spent here getting the details right is well worth it. The landing is a big focus of the waterfront area, and I expect I'll be back at some point to add more details. Sometimes you just forget what props you have in your asset collection, so when I find them later I'll come back and add them. Next to the landing here we'll have a handful of dock areas for yachts and boats. Somewhere around this area I want to have a ferry terminal that takes passengers across the Petpeswick Inlet towards the future seaside town by Martinique Beach. Another tip for players: if you're working on areas by the water, press play on the simulation once in a while to allow the water to adjust to your changes. You don't want a tidal wave flooding your newly built area. I didn't include much detail in the docks yet, but I did place this one little ramp up to the frigate. I'll be back at some point, maybe off camera sometime, to detail this area more. I also placed these barrels from the Ronix dock packs, because no one wants the frigate to smash up against the dock. So this next sequence of the build around the landing involves a lot more networks. Much like when I built the Citadel, I had to fight with the Move It mod a lot to grab the right node or segment. But with some patience I was able to get things where I wanted them without too much clipping or too many terrain issues. In front of the landing there's an open square. I ended up not filling it with much more than a flag and some tables. I think I'll have a farmer's market here. Again, this will probably be put together off camera some other time. One thing I've learned while making videos is I spend a lot more of my time making videos than actually playing the game. These days I'm usually recording pretty much every minute of gameplay, but perhaps moving forward you might see bigger jumps in the city development, while I'll do more things off camera and just show the highlights. As always, if you've got feedback on how I'm making the videos, I'd appreciate your input. Let me know in the comments if you want more time-lapse, more cinematics, or anything else. This stair network is perhaps one of my most recent favorites. It can be used in small segments as a staircase, or like here, I've used it as a sort of seating option along the pathway, offering a nice spot to stop and eat your lunch while looking across the water. Back on the dock side of the landing, I extend the quay network to tidy up the waterfront. Off camera at the end of the quay, I place a boat launch which will be public access for anyone to use. Elsewhere in the region, there'll be private boat and yacht clubs. From the boat launch I mentioned earlier down to the park at the mouth of the Petpeswick Inlet, appropriately named the Petpeswick Park, there's a path for pedestrians to walk the waterfront. The whole area is going to be for pedestrian enjoyment. If you couldn't tell by how much I talk about it, I'm from the Halifax area of Nova Scotia, and one of my favourite places to walk in the city is on the harbour waterfront along the boardwalk. So here I'm adding a few details to fill the square at the landing, but I've convinced myself now that this needs to be a farmer's market. The layout will stay the same. I'll keep the flag and the stone bollards you'll see me place alongside the road, but I've got a few assets that I know will work well here to make a nice lively market. I'll likely post pictures on Instagram or include some short clips in future episode cinematics, but for now, these paths, seating areas, planters and trees will work. And that'll be the landing pretty well complete. There's still a lot of other areas in the city that need to be worked on. What's left of the video will be spent making downtown besides the Petpeswick Park. Now these buildings are great. The details on them are just awesome. There's 3 sizes, and while I want them everywhere, Chezzetcook isn't a massive city. This isn't Toronto, this isn't Montreal. We're in Nova Scotia and I'm trying to keep it modestly sized. I managed to find space for a small and mid-sized building, The small one fits nicely on the downtown end. It doesn't block too many other buildings when looking at downtown from the Citadel. The mid-size one fits nicely across town with all the new condo buildings. You haven't seen much of that end of the city yet, but you will. That end of the city is newer and allowed for higher, more modern condos to be built. It's located near the Acadie University and next to the port of Chezzetcook that will be built in a later episode. These small condos are great, and I probably will use these everywhere. But something neat I did here was place driveways into the building's garages and actually put parking lots inside. That way you get cars moving in and out. Here you see I'm trying to follow the contour lines of the Citadel to place the road, and I think that's a big tip for players looking to make cities seem more organic. Use the landscape as a guide. Anyway, the road leads down towards an area I haven't finalized a name for yet, but if you're familiar with the New England townhouse collection, you're probably going to see a lot of that style down in front of the Citadel. Behind this condo building and a lot of others in the city that you won't see on camera are these small parking and loading areas. A few details here instead of just plopping some bushy trees adds just that touch of realism your city needs. All it takes is a handful of decals and some garbage cans or whatever else you want. You obviously can't detail every corner of the city, but the right corners make a big difference. Next, you're going to see me use a lot of vanilla buildings. Some of the vanilla apartment buildings are pretty similar to some of the older apartment buildings you'd find in Halifax. More brick and concrete with small balconies. I'm also trying to keep the height fairly low here with just the occasional taller building. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but the idea is that the Citadel has historic views. What that means is that there can't be any building that blocks certain views from certain points on the Citadel. In Halifax, that includes being able to see certain islands in the harbour. Here in Chezzetcook, it's to allow views from the Citadel across the Petpeswick Inlet to a watchtower. There's a few that I'll talk about in detail another time, but the point is that when the Citadel was in use, they would communicate with flags, so you have to have a clear line of sight. This is actually why Petpeswick Park exists, to allow unobstructed views of the mouth of the inlet from the Citadel. Finally, I've widened this road as it's the road that leads directly to Petpeswick Landing, and because of that, it developed to be a commercial area, with residential areas developing adjacent to it. But that'll have to do for commentary because that is the end of the time lapse. Expect bigger changes between episodes moving forward. Next thing that I know I'm for sure working on is the lower density residential areas and Petpeswick Park. So thanks for joining me, enjoy the cinematics, and I'll see you next time.